This week, I went back on Piers Morgan's YouTube channel to discuss Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people. Alas, Piers still will not accept that as a fact, or even the question of war crimes. Honestly, you're going to have to listen to this to believe what I'm actually telling you here. We had a lot to talk about. It got very heated, tetchy. You can see my ADHD on full display. And I think it's fair to say he barracked me extensively. Morgan had an inadvertent gotcha, which is circulated pretty extensively on Twitter. Alas, his team did not include natural response, which I think is pretty naughty behavior, but whatever. I'm afraid that comes with the territory. Keep to the end of this video. You can actually hear what I really said, rather than Piers just not letting me talk and then his team abruptly ending the clip. Top. Last time I went on the show was back in November 2023, towards the beginning of the genocide, when I argued it was genocide. That interview got approaching 2 million combined views on YouTube at the time. I would say it has stood the test of time in the most gruesome way possible. Check it out if you've got time. I do have reservations about going on the show because I'm just cards on the table. I'm aware I'm a culture war prop, basically, for a section of his natural audience. I do have self-awareness. And the last thing I want is for Palestine to be a culture war topic, but it's got a big reach. Channel's platformed a lot more pro-Palestinian voices than mainstream channels, which is a damning indictment of them, of course. Some have said Piers has made progress in his views about what Israel's doing to the Palestinian people. Let's put that to the test. On the subject of Israel committing war crimes, I'm sorry, but what Piers says here is beyond absurd. Wait till you hear this logic.
Is Israel ever allowed to defend itself?
Israel needs to become a single state from the river to the sea in which Jewish people and Palestinians have equal rights. That's what it needs to do. And until that happens, there will never be peace.
I believe in a two-state solution where they all get the same human rights. On that, I agree.
Okay, but the reason, the war crimes, which you keep erasing because you keep
I
starting
want to see the evidence of the war crimes. So when it comes, I will be the first to lambast them.
They did them on camera.
But I prefer due process on these things.
Yeah, but when they declare to the world they're fighting human animals and they're going to, from the very beginning, they said...
I would call Hamas human animals.
They didn't say, they said civilians.
Right, well,
they said the residents of Gaza,
right.
And they said they were cutting off, at the very beginning, water and fuel. Is a deliberate siege of a deliberate siege of a civilian population, is that a war crime, yes or no?
Listen, if you're asking me, do I agree with the occupation? No.
No, I'm talking about the siege. They announced the siege of Gaza.
No, they shouldn't have been able to do it.
Is it a war crime or not?
Probably.
So you accept they committed war crimes from day one then?
I think the siege that they enacted because they were able to is indicative of the wider, bigger picture problem of the occupation. I agree with that.
So you conceded the point then. You've conceded the point that this doesn't begin, obviously, in the 7th of October.
Of course not.
But then...
I've never said that.
You would never say...
I think you should watch my show more often.
Well, I've got life
It's good to have you back.
Life's too short.
It's good to have you back. But honestly, life isn't too short for you to be better informed about what I do on my show.
Well, you don't accept Israel's committing genocide.
All these generalisations, which make me think you haven't watched it enough.
You don't think Israel's committing genocide?
You'd be better informed if you watched my show more often.
Do you think Israel's committing genocide?
As you were about our friend Bob Vylan,
Israel,
who it turned out made you look a right chump.
Well, anyway, you look more of a chump when you won't accept Israel's committing genocide, Piers, which is really easy to do. You could just say it now. Is Israel committing genocide? When the ICC says it's genocide, I will say it's genocide. So that's what we have. That's the only time you're waiting.
That's kind of a legal process I'm waiting for.
Okay, so you will never...
But we've run out of time.
Okay, so
it's good to see you.
If Hamas... You don't think Hamas has
come back again soon. Come back again soon.
Okay, fair enough.
Hamas committed war crimes.
But you've not waited for the ICC to make their case?
No, because Hamas broadcast it on their own GoPros.
So have Israel.
We're committing war crimes.
It's literally on camera. Thousands of war crimes.
We've run out of time. Literally, the studio has run out of time. Okay, however, I would love to have you back more often. Sure. I enjoy our debates. Okay, and actually, we agree with a lot more than probably people think.
You do need to move over to accepting it's genocide. I think that would be very important given your platform and influence.
And there may be a time I do that.
OK, well, let's see.
But it's good to see you.
You too.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So we have to wait for due process for Israel's war crimes, but we don't have to with Hamas's war crimes because they were recorded. Not to be rude here, but has he ever used the internet? Does he use the internet? I think he does, actually, quite extensively. What gives? No crime has been more documented on camera as it actually happened than Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people. It's a live-streamed genocide. It's called that for a reason. The mass indiscriminate destruction of civilian property. Israeli soldiers gleefully posting war crimes as they sing and chant and celebrate committing war crimes. The mass butchery of civilians. I mean, babies, hundreds, thousands maybe, cooked alive, suffocated under rubble, and yes, beheaded by Israeli weapons. Israeli soldiers gang raping Palestinian detainees on camera. Israel repeatedly broadcasting it's imposing a total siege in Gaza, which is itself a war crime. There are so many war crimes which are recorded. If I had to talk about them all, we'd be here forever. as well as the filmed, if we're going to go there, countless statements of criminal and genocidal intent made by Israeli leaders and officials. Goodness me. The idea that, you don't need a process, a legal process, to judge that Hamas has committed war crimes because of camera evidence, but not Israel. I honestly just, I don't know what to say. How could you possibly argue that? But what about specifically the question of Israel committing genocide?
What Israel's been doing in Gaza in the last few months...
Is it genocide?
...has crossed... I don't think it is genocide.
Well, okay,
I don't think it is genocide.
This is a real problem.
Hang on. No, it's not a problem.
It is a problem, because you're a genocide denier.
Hang on. I'm not a genocide denier.
You are. Do you think Israel's committing genocide? Yes or no?
Do you know what genocide is?
Yes, I do.
What do you think it is?
Genocide is the intention to destroy a people in whole or in part.
Right. Okay.
Do you not think that's what's happening to the Palestinians of Gaza?
Do you think they're trying to kill every Palestinian?
That's not the definition of genocide. Which genocide is every single person being killed?
I think what is happening is more ethnic cleansing. Okay? It's how I would describe it. We can disagree.
No. This is.
We can disagree. A lot of people think it is genocide.
No. Okay.
It has not been officially declared a genocide, right?
What does that? Obviously,
it hasn't been officially declared
The International Court of Justice is the only arbiter you could point to. No, just quickly, they would have to take years to do that. Okay, let me just put.
I would call it what Smodrich is talking about is ethnic cleansing.
A consensus of genocide scholars believe Israel is committing genocide. And that includes, just quickly, Israeli scholars of genocide. Omar Bartov, he's a professor of genocide and Holocaust studies.
But you asked me what I think.
No. No, but this is what I'm going to ask you, because we're talking about experts, people who actually dedicate their lives.
But many experts say it isn't.
No, let me quickly. Omar Bartov, Raz Sigal, these are only Israeli genocide scholars. Amos Goldberg, Israeli professor of Holocaust history. Daniel Blattman, he's the head of the Institute.
What's the ICC said?
The Israeli the ICC is still investigating, and their charges are public. Now, come up with another.
What's it said?
Well, we don't know, because they've been ordered not to release any future charges.
We do know that it has not declared it a genocide.
Yet.
Right.
Yeah,
there's evidence that it's potential. I agree with that.
Can you tell me? No,
I agree with that. By the way,
Piers, can you give me
let me get a word in.
Can you tell me a single genocide scholar who thinks this isn't genocide?
Let me get a word in.
Okay.
My biggest problem with all of this is that you and I can argue the toss about numbers and this and that and scale and genocide, the ethnic cleansing and so on. The reason we don't know more about how to assess this is because British and international journalists have not been allowed into Gaza to do their job. On that, I think we completely agree, right? If the international journalists were allowed in, they could get to the bottom of all this stuff. I think when they finally get in, we are going to find evidence of appalling war crimes. I really believe that. I believe that is why the Israeli government continues to ban international journalists. So it may well be that when the journalists get in, that you and I meet again, and I say to you, I believe the bar for genocide was met. At the moment, I don't.
So can Piers,
well, that's my honest opinion.
Can I just ask you? You spoke for a long time there. I read several genocide scholars. There's a consensus of genocide scholars who believe this is genocide. I'm asking you to name me one.
Well, I'll just name the ICC who have not ruled that yet.
We don't know that.
Well, we do.
No, we don't. Sorry, the ICC, just quickly, is this true or not? Do you know this? The ICC have ordered any future charges cannot be made public. We don't know what other charges they've made. The bar for genocide, because of intent, is much higher.
Right.
Now, so we don't know what charges they're going to make.
So we don't know it's genocide yet?
Well...
You just admitted it.
No.
Or did you not?
It takes years, that process. The legal process takes years.
So why don't we wait for that to determine whether it's genocide or not?
We can rely on the evidence of genocide scholars who dedicate their lives. Okay. You think you know better than genocide scholars. That's
you think the scholars know more than the ICC? Maybe they do.
Maybe they don't, because the ICC takes years.
It's clearly an arguable point.
Well, it isn't, because the ICC take years. That legal process takes years. Now, for example, on the 9th of October, the head of Kogat, the Israeli general in charge of Kogat, he said, the Major General Ghassanalian, he said Hamas has become ISIS. He said the citizens of Gaza are celebrating instead of condemning. Human beasts will be dealt with accordingly. You will get no water or energy, just damage. You asked for hell, you wanted hell. That tweet was addressed, it was a video, the tweet was addressed to Hamas and the residents of Gaza. Do you accept that's genocidal?
I think it falls into the category of what I've said repeatedly.
Why is that not genocidal?
Well, it's genocidal language.
OK, so he's the guy... Who is he? He's the IDF general.
Smodrich is the leading member of the government.
IDF in charge.
Smodrich talks in genocidal language. I don't dispute that.
So you accept intent is there?
You're asking me
You accept intent as the highest
You
bar to
ask me,
climb.
do I believe yet it is genocide? I do not.
Do you believe there is, do you believe there is genocidal intent?
I believe there's genocidal rhetoric.
No. Well, what's the difference between rhetoric and intent?
What is the difference
expressed by a minister and a general?
Describe to me the difference between a genocide and ethnic cleansing.
Well, ethnic cleansing is just the forcible removal of people from their land on the basis of ethnicity. Genocide is when you attempt to destroy people in whole or in part. You don't actually need to kill people to do that, by the way.
Well, he's all over the place here because the most difficult element actually to prove of genocide is genocidal intent. But he actually concedes genocidal intent by Israeli leaders, but then redefines it as rhetoric, as though the official statements of actual Israeli leaders whose utterances are backed up with firepower and consequences doesn't represent intent. How does that work? You can't name a respected scholar of genocide who says it isn't genocide because none exist. It's really straightforward. The International Criminal Court, as noted, their process is now secret. We don't know what charges now they're going to put. We know they start with a set of charges which focus on starvation, but that's just the initial charges. That legal process goes on forever. Not forever, it goes on for a very long time. His definition of genocide isn't clear to me, but based on what he's saying, that means previous genocides aren't genocides. Let's hear some other parts.
Had you watched the show for the last few weeks and months, you would know.
I don't watch every one, Piers.
I don't think you've watched it for months,
I've seen you watch. But there we go. Because you're admitting there is for the first part of the genocide, when it was clearly a genocide, you were treating
it wasn't clearly a genocide.
Yes, it was.
No.
They said from the beginning what they were going to do.
Was the obvious response, which
When was the most lethal month?
Hamas.
When was the most lethal
first month?
Of Palestinian civilians?
Yes, first month.
Okay, so when they were wiping Gaza from the face of the earth, where Gaza, within 3 months, was a different colour and texture when looked at from space, when they had had the biggest, worst attrition, when Israeli leaders and officials made clear they did not see a distinction between civilians and officials, you don't think that was genocide, and you were treating those people as though they had respectable views.
No, I thought,
but their views are more extreme than Bob Vylan.
I thought the Israeli military response was a direct response to Hamas's official spokesman saying on camera for the world to see, we're going to keep trying to do more and more October the 7th.
Did you think this about Rwanda?
You keep saying what about
No, it's not what about it. It's about consistency. What happened in Rwanda? What's the difference?
I'm not going to talk about every conflict around the world.
No.
You've asked me a direct question. You've asked me a direct question about the first month in which Israel bombarded Hamas in Gaza.
No,
they killed lots of civilians.
Innocent civilians.
They killed lots of civilians.
Thousands of innocent
Well, it's not murder if you are doing a proportionate response to a terror attack.
It wasn't proportionate. Do you accept that?
I kept asking what is proportionate. Right? I have now concluded in the last few months it's gone way past proportionate.
But this is the thing. You spent months.
You don't blame Hamas for what happened in the first few weeks.
It was in the obvious.
Do you not blame Hamas?
The war crimes, I blame them for their war crimes.
You don't blame them for what Israel then did?
Every war crime Israel committed
So Hamas built a massive tunnel network. They then launched the worst terror attack on Jewish people
has no legal
since
standing.
the Holocaust.
Right.
And when Israel inevitably responds the way they did, that's not on Hamas.
There is no legal basis for what you just said. You cannot say when you commit war crimes, I was made to do them. Benjamin Netanyahu, in the first week, was given a list of 100 targets by his general. And he said, that's not enough targets. I want 400. And he said, destroy their homes. That's what he said. This was revealed in an Israeli newspaper. Now, the idea that they were, the reason that they slaughtered so many civilians in that first week was because of tunnels is a lie, Piers. And you must know that's a lie.
No.
Once again, nobody can claim that if you have committed war crimes, they're not war crimes because they're in response to other war crimes. I don't need to keep talking about that because, anyway. Let's just hear this segment.
Do you believe that Israel had a right to defend itself?
Gaza, as you know, under international law, wasn't another state. It's occupied legally as per international law.
But all the terrorists came from Gaza.
Yeah, because...
So did Israel have a right to defend itself?
But again, do you know why I regard this as so offensive to the worth of Palestinian life? I'll tell you why. In 2020...
Do you think Hamas cared about the lives of Palestinians?
No, I haven't argued that.
When they committed that
you know what I think about
atrocity?
7th October? We don't have to, 632 days into genocide, have to start going back to do you condemn Hamas? You know my views on that. We don't arm...
That wasn't my question.
We don't arm and support Hamas.
I said, do you think Hamas cared about the lives of Palestinians when they launched that attack? Having built an intricate tunnel system which protected Hamas but exposed the civilians to certain death.
I don't support Hamas. It's not relevant. What?
Of course they're relevant.
No, it isn't relevant. I'll tell you why it's not relevant. I'll tell you why you would
Hamas isn't relevant.
You would find this question offensive if I put it to you. If I had said to you, in 2023, 240 Palestinians had been killed that year by the Israeli state, including 40 children. What else was Hamas supposed to do on the 7th of October? What would you say?
Are you justified?
No, that's the point. I'm saying you would say correctly, there was never any excuse for war crimes. This is an outrageous question for you to
But responding to a terror attack isn't a war crime. What has happened in the last few months to me has now crossed the line between legitimate self-defence to the worst terror attack of modern times against the Jewish people, has gone now past that into, and clearly from what people like Smodrich is saying, has gone into a plan, it seems to me, by the government to cleanse Gaza of Palestinians, which is a war crime.
No, sorry, it's so easy for you to use Smodrich as your bogeyman.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because he says it on camera.
Yeah, no one doubts that Smotrich and Ben Gvir are deeply unpleasant, mass-murdering, genocidal maniacs. Or, well, people do tonight. Unfortunately, a lot of people coming on the show. But who should be in prison, OK? From the very beginning, Israeli leaders and officials made clear they were going to commit a genocide. They made clear they saw no distinction between civilians and people. And the problem is, people like yourself, now, you're literally fueling a continuing campaign about a rapper and what he said on stage. Well,
a rapper you've defended.
Now, the point I was making here alludes to that important maxim. Nothing can justify 7th October, but everything can be justified by 7th October. So even though Israel's gone on this monstrous genocidal rampage, and indeed Israel's leaders and officials made clear from the very beginning that they regarded the civilian population of Gaza as fair game, that can still be rationalised as self-defence in response to 7th October, even if Piers now thinks it's gone too far. But he would never, ever accept that logic being applied to 7th October. Even though, and I've never denied, in terms of crimes in 7th October, never denied that, the crimes committed since are infinitely worse. But the point is, Israel committed a litany of war crimes in the months leading up to it, let alone the years and decades and generations. So what's the argument for saying that one is self-defense that's gone too far, whilst the other isn't? I mean, that's what would happen if you applied his logic. And as I've said, Israel's crimes are objectively far, far greater than 7th of October. That's just a fact in terms of lethality, destruction. I mean, it's every single day. My view is you should never do war crimes. The point here is the dynamic. Obviously, Israel's the illegal occupying colonizer, which is a military superpower armed back to the teeth by the West, whereas the Palestinians are utterly subjugated and colonized. The permanent position that Israel has imposed on the Palestinian people is inherently criminal. I mean, the dynamic is one where it's a permanent crime, or lots of permanent crimes. But again, it's this idea that you could say, even though what Israel has done is the most obscene crime of our age, you could still claim that self-defense that spiraled out of control, even though actually it's so spiraled out of control. It was inherently genocidal from the start, but obviously he would never say that about 7th of October. You can see the issue there, can't you? Here's the gotcha moment regarding Bob Vylan, this time with the context Piers Morgan's team stripped away.
You and I locked horns a little bit on X a couple of days ago about what happened at Glastonbury. I just felt, Owen, that when people try and pretend what they mean is, well, we just mean the entity. We don't actually mean IDF soldiers. It's disingenuous. When a crowd chants death to the IDF, what they mean is they think IDF soldiers should be killed.
People talk about the death of institutions all the time. Keir Starmer, when he said the NHS must reform or die, did he mean, and maybe you should probably give a bit of warning to doctors, nurses and patients around the world, does he literally mean they're going to be killed?
Of course not.
So just to be clear then.
You're comparing...
You think that the NHS... So when people say the NHS will die, literally they say the NHS will die without reform, are they saying that they're going to be the mass murder of doctors and patients?
So to be clear, when you watch that rapper at Glastonbury chanting and leading a chant with thousands joining in of death to the IDF, you instinctively believe...
He said it himself. He said himself it means the dismantling of a violent
military machine. He said it since the furore blew up.
But he also said he's opposed to the death of Jews, Arabs or any other race or group of people. And Piers, I don't want to be rude, but that puts him in a rather different category than a lot of your pro-Israel.
But hang on, when did he post that?
Well, the next day.
Of course.
What do you mean, of course?
It wasn't the next day, it was actually the day after.
So you're saying that a rapper should have done a long, verbose statement on stage? He's a rapper. If the Russian army on Friday, if Russian officers and soldiers had confessed that they had been ordered to deliberately shoot Ukrainian civilians who they had been ordered to starve already. They'd put a total siege on Ukraine for several months. They had been ordered to shoot dead those unarmed, starving civilians, and they had killed over 600 of them, including an 18-month girl who they shot in the chest. And then the next day, having seen those reports, people chanting the death of the Russian army, would you honestly, and you really do need to answer honestly here, and I want to just say it from the heart, would you honestly regard that as an outrage? Or would you regard that as an obvious emotional response to an absolute unbelievable war crime?
Right, so you accept then that the rapper was talking about soldiers?
No, people call for the death of the Russian army all the time.
Because new footage has emerged and circulated today of Bob Vylan saying on stage, villain, death to every single IDF soldier, May 2025.
To be honest, I mean, I don't know about that footage, I haven't seen it. To be honest, that still puts him, I'm afraid to say, Piers, in a better category than most of your
But he's completely contradicted everything you've just said.
I haven't
and to be honest,
I'm not Bob Vylan's spokesperson.
And by the way, I'm not playing gotcha. I just got told that myself.
No, fair enough.
They've literally put it on the iPad because it's gone round today.
Fair enough. I would never myself...
But clearly that shows his actual meaning was not what he put as an excuse 2 days later. What he meant was death to every single IDF soldier.
That I honestly...
So then the argument becomes your one about the Russian troops in Ukraine. And my point is, coming from a family full of military, military do the orders of their government. Often on pain of imprisonment.
I'm afraid to say...
Often on pain... Well, you may want to say that that's not the case, but actually an army goes into battle and the orders... when we went into war against Iraq in 2003, many of those soldiers would have had serious misgivings.
Piers, we've just made a...
So who is accountable? Tony Blair, who orders them in, or the soldiers who do their job?
Piers, we established at Nuremberg that I was just following orders is not a legal excuse. You're absolutely right. The perpetrators of genocide should be hauled before the courts. That's principally the likes of Benjamin Netanyahu and those at the top. But Israeli soldiers who are massacring knowingly unarmed civilians, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so
they are legally required. Strictly, they are legally required to refuse to enact those orders. Now, just on that point, by the way, people like myself oppose sending IDF soldiers into Gaza. And if that had happened, not only would hundreds of thousands potentially of Palestinians' lives and be saved and not maimed and all the rest, but those hundreds of Israeli soldiers wouldn't have been killed either. A lot of your guests, ironically, the pro-Israel guests, supported sending hundreds of IDF soldiers to their deaths in pursuit of what is a genocidal campaign of extermination.
He's made all of you look like complete prunes.
No, the people I'm defending principally are the people in the audience. I do not believe thousands of people attending Glastonbury were supporting that. And what I find actually even more grotesque, to be honest, and this is what I find grotesque, that view, which I don't support killing anyone, which is what IDF soldiers shouldn't be shouldn't be sent into Gaza.
Well, then we agree.
To kill and
hang on, then we agree.
No, your guests...
You don't believe in killing it. I agree with you.
Your guests, who you treat as respectable people come on this show, have more extreme views than he does. Now, the reason what he said, which I do not support, by the way, there, is
that's good.
Less extreme.
That's good.
Less extreme than your guests is under international law. It's legal to kill combatants. It is not legal to kill civilians either because of disproportionate actions, intentionally or recklessly. Your guests who come on this show, who are pro-Israel guests, they support an onslaught which doesn't just kill combatants but kills civilians. That is more extreme than what that man said. But you don't treat them as that. Why don't you treat those people as more extreme than that man? Why?
Now, look, just from a basic point of view, I'm just a not let's rejoice in killing sort of person. I oppose the death penalty even for the most extreme crimes. That's my own heartfelt view. I'm not a pacifist. For example, in the case of World War II, I supported the just war against the Nazis. I do think, by the way, war crimes were committed by us, so to speak. I mean, Dresden, for example. But the point is, I regard human violence as utterly abhorrent and to be avoided in every possible circumstances possible. I think turning human beings into killing machines is repulsive, not least when you turn human beings into instruments of genocide. Every moral person should agree that the IDF has forfeited its right to exist by perpetrating genocide. If people like me had been listened to, then there'd be no IDF soldiers in Gaza, and they wouldn't be perpetrating genocide, and obviously, as well as not having killed countless civilians, hundreds of IDF soldiers wouldn't have been killed too. The point is, whatever interpretation of death to the IDF, and it's absolutely clear to me, because I was there at Glastonbury, that people chanting death to the IDF forget the performer, they understood that as the end of the IDF. That is, even if it was kill IDF soldiers, that's actually still much less extreme than the pro-Israel position. That's the point. Because as I've noted, under international law, it's actually legal. You can legally kill combatants. It is never legal to kill civilians by intent, disproportionality, or recklessness. All three apply to Israel's genocidal onslaught of Gaza. It's baked in. Its genocidal intent couldn't be clearer based on the statements of Israeli leaders and officials. And of course, we can all see the mass extermination that the Palestinian people are suffering, from the wiping from the face of the earth of entire extended families, the murder of over 1,400 medics. That alone, by the way, is more than the total number of Israelis killed on 7th October. Now, Bob Vylan is being monstered for a position which is less extreme than the pro-Israel position, which is dominant in British media and politics. If you're saying an abomination to say kill IDF soldiers, then where does that leave people who are backing an onslaught that's murdering civilians en masse? Far more civilians and combatants. Now, it's deranged, of course, that there is more outrage over a chant than the mass extermination of a people. As I keep saying, the world's been turned on its head. You can see in context what I actually said now on the very selectively edited version put out by his team. I would love to hear your thoughts. So do leave them in the comments, by the way. I'd love to hear your discussion about this. I do read your comments. Please like and subscribe as well. Help us take on a mainstream media overall, which of course is facilitated genocide. Patreon.com/7days84. Obviously, I'm not doing the work here. I've got a very capable person to do it, thanks to all you guys. And that's why we're reaching millions of people on each different platform. So do support us as best you can. Yes, listen to the podcast if you prefer. Don't have to see my face then, do you? I'll speak in a bit.